everybody is not your neighbor. Everybody doesn't deserve to be taken care of like they're your family and your neighbor, because not everybody has that same level of accountability to you, and that is incredibly important. And welcome to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for state and local level news and politics with a constitutional and conservative viewpoint. Now today, we have a very exciting show for you. Not just saying that because it's my show, but it is a very exciting show. We will be covering a few key topics. Four key topics. One, we are certainly hearing whispers and rumors that the school choice constitutional amendment will be considered at least this session. Could pass, could see that on the ballot in November of 2024. Beshear tweets out communist talking points, and the left cheers. People just don't understand what they're reading because, of course, they're invalids who want the government to take care of them. Also, we'll have a return of a section called "What Did I Do to Upset the Left?" And finally, as well, not finally, but I've got a little update and some things going on. In fact, we'll dive into that probably first real quick with the updates. But before I do all that, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all those things. If you're listening on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on Facebook, like the page, follow the page. If you're listening on Twitter, follow the Twitter. If you are listening somewhere else, follow that. Follow Andrew Cooperrider, the page there. Also, as well, you can always catch us if you're listening this in replay on YouTube or Facebook. This is offered in an audio-only format on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, everywhere, every major place there's podcasts. This show is offered. You can download it or you can listen to it there. You don't have to just leave me on in the video. So first, starting off with a few updates. So many of you were aware, not last week before last, I did a show every day for 5 days. Those were 40-minute-ish shows. They were sectioned out specifically so that way if people were to put in ad times, things like that, we were figuring out a few things. We are moving forward on that front. The reason why we weren't able to do a podcast last week is because we're so busy with moving that forward, and then this week we're working hard on that as well. But daily podcasts with updates will return. See, we wanted to see if there was actually enough things going on, if there actually was enough content for a show that focuses on specifically state and local level issues every day, not following these national issues that you can listen to anywhere. You can literally go listen to every single Daily Wire show and hear the exact same headlines you would hear. You can go listen to Sean Hannity's show, Mark Levin. You can listen to all of those, and they will provide you with great national updates. But I want to focus on state and local level news and politics because that is where we can actually make a difference. That's where a few thousand people vote for your state house rep. You can develop that personal connection and you can make a difference. And so we are moving that forward. In fact, Daily Show will be coming back. We'll be coming in with possibly even more longer content as well, having on a lot of guests, things of that nature. But we're getting that set up. We're getting a nice studio set up there in one of my offices, and so on and so forth. So look forward to that. I wanted to give you that update before we move forward and encourage you, keep following, keep listening, and let's now dive into it here today. So the state legislature will be, seems like, based on some talks we're seeing this week, next week, kind of some of the interim meetings as they develop their plans moving forward. Looks like we may end up with that all-important constitutional amendment change to allow school choice. For those of you who are unaware, our state constitution says that the state government shall provide public school, or not, state government shall fund public school. It states that it is a job of the state and your local governments to provide you with a elementary education. So that is and K through 12 education. So that is in our state constitution. And the problem is quite a few years ago, as the school choice thing was moving forward, there was a ruling out of our state Supreme Court, which, by the way, Keep in mind, those are elected positions. So anyways, there was a call out of our state Supreme Court that said that public dollars couldn't go to private schools. So they read into that to mean that school choice wouldn't be allowed. And the only thing we could allow would be perhaps a charter school. Now, the way charter schools historically had been put in place is they had to be approved by the school boards. And so that meant that there was no charter schools being put in place. It also lacked funding too, as well as a way for those to be funded. And so charter schools are simply schools that are, in a way, they're public schools. They're chartered nonprofits. They have an agreement, rules that they have to execute in order to stay, quote unquote, open. And then they have draws or allow individuals to lotteries in order for people to get in, because of course they see a lot of people applying. Why? Because they are schools where people can get kicked out of, which makes it a little bit different. Now, what we're seeing is a push for some private schools, to allow private schools to receive a dollar amount. So basically how it would work, and what everybody wants to see, is that us with children would receive a voucher for an amount of money. So right now the state pays right around about $4,500 per student per year. I believe it's more than that, but let's say it's $4,500. $4,500 per year per student. So you, as a parent, would get a voucher for $4,500. But then also as well, you're seeing your state and local schools, they're spending $18,000 per student. And so there is some talk about being able to make sure that you get a voucher for even maybe more than that, at least for you have the federal funds coming in, or maybe even the local funds being able to come in and help that. But at least $4,500 voucher, and then you can choose to take that where you'd want to. So you can take that to a private school. Now, granted, most private schools, that's not going to cover all the tuition. Take a nice private school like here in Lexington, LCA. That's about $12,000 a year. So of course, $4,500 takes it down to $7,500, but it does provide at least maybe some more avenues where school choice, quality education, is more in reach. And understand this. School choice exists for people who have the means. I'll make no bones about it. My son is enrolled at a private school. We have school choice because I can afford to make that decision, and I can afford to put him into a private school. That is not something, though, everybody can afford. And I don't think a child's quality of education should be dependent upon the parent's ability to pay extra above and beyond what the taxpayer is already footing the bill for. We already are required to provide a quality education, and for that we are failing. Now, if you want to say, let's get the state out of education completely, I'm with you. Let's have that conversation. Let's talk about getting rid of all school taxes of all kinds, and then having parents in charge of making sure their kids get educated. Let's have that discussion, but that is not a discussion that's realistic in the time. The discussion we can have right now is, how do we get, if we have to pay these taxes, if we have to pay this money, how can we get better quality education? School choice is quite clearly it. But in order to really achieve school choice, we have to have a constitutional amendment here in Kentucky. This constitutional amendment has to change our provisions to allow dollars to truly follow the student. There's been typically a lot of pushback for this. It's hard to come to. Why? Well, there's a few different reasons of pushback. You'll see rural counties, especially public schools, are their number one employer. And so these rural counties, representatives and state senators will a lot of times be against being pushed forward on school choice because they are concerned with the ability for these the biggest employers in their area, the public schools, to continue to be funded. But I think some of that is you had to have a conversation of, well, how much would they really lose? Now, you could see some communities, for an example. When I was running for the state senate, Garrett County was in my area that I was running in. School choice is of concern in that area because a lot of the parents in Garrett County live or work in Jessamine or Fayette counties, or even over into Richmond, and working in those areas, or Danville even. And all those areas have enough population, especially with the school choice, that you'd start to see a lot more private school options, and they can take their kids there on their way to school, drop them off, and then they're able to do that. And so that is of concern to these bedroom communities. But at the end of the day, I think we also have to say you've got to compete in this education, and to say that, look, we're not even talking about if a school can spring up and do the work for 40, even if we're just talking about the Sikh dollars following them, the 4,500 following them, you still have to. You're competing against $6,500 somebody has to pay, or 6,000, even maybe 5,000 would say a cheaper private school, even $4,000 or free. And if you're saying you can't provide a good enough product that parents would rather spend $4,000 to send their kids to private school than your free public school, well, that tells me there's a problem with the product. You need to be looking internally. Instead of lamenting the fact you would have competition, rise to the occasion and provide the high quality of services that we know you are capable of doing. But there you go. We've got probably going to see in 2024 a school choice amendment on our ballots. That's a referendum. The way constitutional changes happen, it has to pass the Senate and the House. The governor can veto, and then the Senate and House can override, and then it goes to a ballot for a referendum, and then we, as the citizens of Kentucky, have to vote to the majority to vote to change our state constitution to the new amendment. So we'll see what happens with that there. So Andy Beshear is tweeting out full communistic talking points, and of course, the left isn't seeing it, and frankly, the right, at least whether it's Republican Party of Kentucky, some of the camps outside of Cameron, even if Cameron could message on it a little more, I know it's harder maybe for him, but some of these people got to be doing war on some of these issues. And here's one that he tweeted out there on June 12th. He tweeted out, "At the end of the day, Kentucky families aren't talking about the back and forth of politics. They're worrying about their kids, whether they can afford health care or they can make ends meet. Those are the issues I'm focused on as governor." And so you say, okay, that's not bad. You're focused on how ends meet. And if you're talking about getting government out of the way in order to allow private businesses to come in and do the work that they're supposed to do, fantastic. That's something I can be with. But then he tweets out other things that, quite frankly, is something that I find very alarming. And to give you an example, this is Andy Beshear's tweet here. "I believe that if we remember the golden rule." Now, what is the golden rule? If you remember, the golden rule is treat every neighbor as you want to be treated, which is actually not a very good rule. And I know a lot of people will say, "Andrew, what are you saying?" I'm saying that claiming the golden rule is treat people as you would like to be treated. How I want to be treated is maybe not how you would like to be treated, right? A person who isn't me wants all their needs taken care of by the government. So that would be how they'd want to treat me. They want to take care of everything for me. That is not what I want. I don't want you taking care of everything for me. That is not how I would want to be treated. I want you to leave me the heck alone so I can live my life. And so that's not, even saying the golden rule is a political talking point, not a big fan of. But he goes on to say, "I believe that if we remember the golden rule, to treat your neighbor as yourself, and that everyone is our neighbor." There we go again. If you remember several episodes ago, 2 weeks ago, I was talked about this idea, this concept. They've got to push out this collectivism idea. The collectivism idea that is the base root of communistic thinking. That, we're all in this together. Everybody's your neighbor. We're all family. Because the way you would treat your next door neighbor is different than how you treat somebody you don't know. Why? Because they have no accountability to you. You let your next door neighbor borrow your mower because you know if they don't give it back, you can go hunt it down. It's right next door. And you can stay on them about that. You see them maybe even every day, but you see them often. You know where they live. You don't let some person that you don't even know the address of borrow your mower in hopes you'll get it back. You're never going to get that mower back. And this is just a mower. Now we're talking about monetary assistance, those types of items. There is no accountability. Everybody is not your neighbor. Everybody doesn't deserve to be taken care of like they're your family and your neighbor, because not everybody has that same level of accountability to you, and that is incredibly important. But he continues to treat your neighbor as yourself, and that everyone is your neighbor. We will ensure every Kentuckian has what they need to thrive. Every zip code, every county, everybody counts in the Commonwealth. We will ensure everybody has what they need to thrive. Who's we? Well, Beshear's, of course, talking about himself. He's talking about the government, making sure they are there to take care of you. That they will be there to take care of everything you need. No worries at all whatsoever. Auntie Beshear, Daddy Beshear is here to make sure that you're taken care of. And least you think that was a one-off, let me read you another one of his quotes from his tweets here. Kentucky deserves to feel safe, secure, and provided for in their communities. That's right. He said Kentuckians deserve to feel safe, secure, and provided for in their communities. Does government have a job providing safety and security? To a degree. That's one of the few reasons government was instituted according to our Constitution. That our government was instituted to protect and secure our rights. As I've said many times, to make sure that I have a right to property, and that right isn't just based upon my ability to get enough people together to hold guns to defend my property. The reason why that's my property and a roving gang of 30, 40 people can't come and just take it from me is because things like the police and military exist to provide the security and the safety of our rights. Now, of course, that can go too far, right? That can go too far. I think saying every American, every Kentuckian deserves to feel that their rights are intact would be more accurate than to say safe and secure. That my right to life, liberty, and property is safe and secure. That means I get to own a gun. And that means also when I pick up the phone and dial 911 because I'm the victim of a crime, somebody can show up. I think that goes into it too as well. But he finishes out. So we can argue about safe and security. Is that government's role? Is that not? What do you nuance? What do you mean by it? But then he says, and provided for in their communities. You do not deserve to be provided for. I'll say that again. You do not deserve to be provided for. A right, something you deserve, you cannot get from somebody else. You physically can't. Otherwise, that's what we call a positive right, not a negative right. A negative right is a right you just have, and somebody has to take it from you. A positive right is something you have to take from somebody else. These are things like healthcare, food, anything that requires other people to do work to provide it to you. To say you have a right to something means if I sit my butt down, it should be given to me. If I just sit in the middle of a forest, it should be given to me. Now, you can say that it isn't fair that people have to work for food. You could say that it isn't fair that people have to provide for themselves, and I hear you. But that is not an issue to take up with government. That is an issue to take up with nature. For if you did nothing in nature, you would die. If you sat down in a forest and did nothing, you would die of hunger, starvation, you'd be attacked by an animal, you would die. What we have provided as a society is ways that we've moved beyond just creating food. And instead we have all these luxuries of lives, but you still have to do work to provide for yourself the same way that if you were in a forest, you'd have to do work to provide for yourself. And I love these people saying, humans weren't designed to work 40 hours a week. 50 hours a week and then die. You're right. Humans were designed to work every waking moment of their lives originally. We are designed to be either constantly foraging for food. We are designed to either be constantly looking for water. We are designed to either be constantly protecting ourselves, building shelter, and ensuring our protection, whether that's by going out and patrolling our lands, or if that is by being preemptive, or if that is by working on how to hunt and how to protect ourselves as a tribe back in the day, and then also to procreate. Well, that's what we were built to do all day long. And the only part of that which one could make an argument isn't work is maybe procreation. Otherwise, that is all work. We as humans were literally designed to work every waking moment of our lives. And it isn't until modern luxuries of today where you only need to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week sometimes in order to provide things like a house and water and more food than you could ever eat, and computers and health care, the ability to be treated when you get injured. All those things you can now provide for yourself, not even having to work every moment of your life like you would have to before all these technologies came along. It has freed up our time, hasn't enslaved us more, but yet that is how they look at it, because leftists and communists, they hate nature. They want you to blame capitalism or blame freedom, the fact that you have a choice to give something to a person or not. They want to blame that for all the evils in the world, but it's nobody's fault but nature's. The fact you were born means you have to work to live. That is nobody's fault. Now, if you're a Christian, you believe it's the fault of the original sin, but putting that to the side. There's no living flesh and blood, currently alive being's fault that they have to work hard. Like I said, if you're a Christian, you believe the original sin, biting the apple of Eden, created the casualty that is humans. Humans falling away from God, not listening to God, is why we have to work so hard. But if you're not a Christian, still, if you're an atheist, if you don't believe in divine powers, then you also can't blame no flesh and blood living being for the fact that you have to work to live. That is nature. That is a part of being alive. Finally, in today's last segment, we are talking about what I did to upset the left this week. Or last week, really. I tweeted out. Now, understand, KDE, this was about a week and a half ago. They decided to get cute and say, look, we found a way that we can teach your kids about transgenderism and blah, 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 blah. Look at us. And then they put out guidance to our K through 12 public educators, going back to what I was talking about school choice earlier. Keep this in mind. But K through 12 educators, in order to so they can keep teaching the garbage that we've this LGBTQ gender theory garbage. And I tweeted out, and this was my point to KD, and I made this point during my podcast. Do you really think the rural Kentucky swing voter wants an administration that celebrates teaching LGBTQ sexuality to K through 5 public school children? KDE coming out with guidance that they believe K through 5 schools can still teach children about sexuality and LGBTQ topics may seem funny to Kentucky Democrats, but this kind of stunt is exactly why Beshear will lose. Kentuckians want a governor who doesn't even want to teach K through 5 children about LGBTQ sexuality, not one trying anything they can in order to teach it. And I tweeted this out. This is simple, straightforward things. And you know I'm right. And they know I'm right. This is why they're so upset about it. We are seeing, of course, what's some of these dumb responses. One of the first dumb responses, 35 law enforcement agencies, coal miners, liberals, teachers, all back Andy. You are, what's that? Wrong. What are they talking about here? 35 law enforcement agencies. First off, it's not 35 law enforcement agencies. It's 35 current or former law enforcement officials. These are sheriffs, chiefs, police officers, so on and so forth, police chiefs, former or current. Okay? 35 former and current. It is Daniel Cameron who has over 100 of those same endorsements. Then they say coal miners. They're talking about this coal mine union that came out and endorsed Beshear. That doesn't represent a single coal miner in Kentucky. In fact, not one coal miner is represented by this union in Kentucky. So no, he doesn't have coal miners. He also doesn't have law enforcement, 35 law enforcement agencies. Liberals, he does have liberals, that is true. And teachers. I don't think he has all teachers. A lot of reasons why, but that's all for later. And they say, all back Andy. Well, you're just wrong. Someone goes, why do Republicans insist on keeping kids ignorant of the things they experience every day? They shouldn't be experiencing them every day. K through 5 should not be experiencing LGBTQ, whatever, every single day. They shouldn't be experiencing any kind of sexuality every single day. You know, I mean, they really shouldn't be seeing any overt sexuality. And look, you can say, well, we're talking about, oh, they see it all the time. They're walking through the stores and they see it. They shouldn't. We're not saying it's right. At the same time, and look, if you're gay, if you're whatever, understand this. I'm not judging you for holding hands and kissing in public because you're gay or LGBTQ or whatever. I'm judging you for holding hands and kissing in public because personally, I find PDA not that great, and I don't like seeing it. But anyways, but why do we insist on keeping kids in the dark about it? Because they shouldn't be exposed to it. A second and third grader shouldn't understand these things. But I'll give you the response that I actually responded on Twitter to. He said, so it's okay to teach K through 5 about heterosexuality? That is what they tweeted out. And he thought he had a really good point. But I tweeted him back and said, in 5th grade, they start to teach children about human reproduction. It's not my fault that heterosexuality actually has educational value because it leads to human reproduction. And this is the point. See, we hear these leftists when you talk about, look, we don't need to be teaching kids about this. We're like, well, we teach K through 5 about heterosexuality. We don't teach them about heterosexuality. We're not teaching them about dating. We're not teaching them about how to go on dates and change their genders and all these other things. What are we teaching kids about? Now, first off, we're not teaching them in kindergarten, certainly. It's not until the 4th or 5th grade that we're currently seeing it. And you can make, and if somebody wants to make an argument that should be moved further into the future, or schools shouldn't be teaching that at all, we can have that discussion. Schools shouldn't be teaching it at all. It gets really hard, and this is my point to them. It gets really hard to teach science if you can't teach about mammalian reproduction. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. Mammals reproduce the same way, generally speaking. Teaching about human reproduction has scientific value because you're teaching about how humans reproduce and how all animals reproduce. And that could be a difficult thing to hold off on teaching too much past 4th or 5th grade, but we could have that discussion. But that's the value. There is literally no educational value to homosexuality, to transgenderism, to all these things. There's no educational value there because we're not talking about reproduction then. We're talking about social actions. And we don't teach kids, unless it's an elective in high school, about psychology. We don't teach kids about those types of things normally, period. If you want to say, look, teaching about the LGBTQ stuff, maybe in a college level gender study or psychology course or humanities, not even humanities. Humanities is arts and stuff. But, human social interaction, maybe evolutionary biology. You want to have that conversation in college level courses. Let's talk about it. But it's not something that's appropriate for schools. And it isn't just who you're banging that we say is inappropriate and doesn't have scientific value necessarily for schools. There's scientific things. I'll give you an example. In K through 12 education, we are taught, unless you're in extremely advanced chemistry, you are taught that matter has 3 forms. It has a liquid, a gas, or solid, right? That's what we all know. Liquid, gas, solid. Those are the 3 forms. There's actually a 4th form. It's called plasma. Okay? We don't teach about that in K through 12 education. I remember that one of my siblings has her PhD in chemistry. And so I remember when she's talking to me about chemistry, and I went to school the next day. I believe I was in middle school, 7th, 8th grade, something like that. And I talked to my science teacher about, what about plasma? When we were talking about the different states of things, he just said, just don't worry about that. Why? Because that was a high advanced level of learning, and to teach about that would fill kids with a lot of knowledge that, generally speaking, you don't need unless you're going to go into that specific field. We're trying to give you general studies. Well, we're giving you the general studies of human reproduction, something incredibly important and something that every single human generally has to understand how reproduction works in order to exist in the world. That is a general studies course. I think everybody should agree how humans continue to reproduce, how kids continue on, how our species continues on, has scientific basic value, right? My point being, is this LGBTQ stuff, this sexuality stuff. It has no scientific value to K through 12 education. It has none. Maybe, like I said, in later courses, but in this case, it just doesn't have any. That's something they don't get. So one, we're getting dumb responses, but they're just in general upset about this. You can tell they're real upset. Got a whole lot of comments about it. I mean, we're talking, they went off the handles, quote tweets, everything else. Why? Because they know we're right. See, that's what you notice. This segment, how I upset the left. What you notice every single time, it's when they're upset that I'm right. They don't argue that rural Kentuckians, even rural Democrats, are against those things because they know that's an argument they lose. The poll data shows it up. Instead, they gnash their teeth and they wail because the truth hurts. But it is the truth, and it matters. Well, that's what we have time for today. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all for joining us so much. Please remember, like, comment, share, subscribe, sign up for the show, listen on podcast form only. Stay tuned. We got some big stuff coming up in the next week or two. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful rest of your